We're so glad you're here.
We believe in bringing in experts to inspire and to educate women so that they can live empowered, fulfilled, and successful lives.
When women support women, we change the world. Here we go.
You're going to love this program. Who are we talking to next?
Yeah, so I am so excited to welcome such a dynamic woman today. She is an accomplished entrepreneur who traded in her successful corporate life to join her parents in ownership of their 30-year-old family business. And working in that business, she decided that she wanted to start giving back to her community and using her skills. So she began to volunteer as a mentor within the small business community in her area. And through this experience, her own business was launched, Spring Business Solutions, which provides small businesses in South Florida with access to sales, marketing, and growth planning strategies. Our guest today is Nicole Mastrangelo. Welcome, Nicole, to The Recharge.
Hi, thanks for having me, everyone.
Hi, Nicole.
Nicole is a founder of The Daily Drip, a media platform that provides content, resources, events, and community designed to propel the future of business women in South Florida. The Daily Drip's 18 contributors, all local female professionals and industry leaders, share their knowledge and expertise to empower and support the personal and professional development of their women. Nicole is also a mother and a recent new fiance. She's also a member of the Advisory Council for the Boca Raton Center for Arts and Innovation and an Advisory Council member for the Levan Innovation Center, where she also delivers courses and programming to propel startups and entrepreneurs. So Nicole, let's just jump right in. What's been your path to creating your own brilliant life?
My path has probably been different than most, but special nonetheless. As you mentioned, I did have, a pretty fulfilling corporate career for the early part of my career. And it was a big part of my development because when I worked for this big company, I got a lot of formal training around leadership, performance management, sales, community outreach and business development. So I had a good foundation by the time I decided to leave and go into the family business. And what really triggered that was just the fact that my career path had kind of gone warp speed. I was traveling a ton. And it got to a point where I realized I wasn't happy traveling like that and working at that pace. And so at the time, my parents were exit planning. They were thinking, okay, we're about 10 years away from retiring. What's going to happen to this business that's been in our family now 2 generations? Are we going to sell it? Are we going to pass it on? And I thought, you know what? This is a good place for me to stretch my legs and see sort of where my skills can take me. Do I really have them? And so for 7 years, I stayed in that business. And I'll never forget when I first got there, my first month, and I'm looking around and we don't use any reporting and there's no sales process and there's no systems of any kind. And I looked at my mom, I go, Mom, how are we keeping the lights on here for this long? Like, how are we doing business like this, And at the time it was a small team. We were a team of 8 and it was my parents and I included in that. And so I spent my first little bit of time really just diving into the business, the systems and the processes, looking at what was missing and trying to fill those gaps. The biggest surprise about that was the impact that made on results. I did not expect to have the growth that we had. In about 2 years, the business was completely different. It looked different. It operated different. We went from a team of 8 to a team of 28 in about 2 years. We went from primarily a residential pest control service business to commercial, where we had about 20 accounts of golf courses and country clubs and condo buildings in the area. So just everyday life in the business had changed. And when I got in the business, there was no business development strategy. There wasn't anyone doing that. It was very reactionary. It was just, here comes the business, let's get it done kind of mentality there. So I really was the one that was the business development representative. I was at the networking groups, the chambers, the nonprofit organizations. And the more I got out there, the more I realized that my parents weren't special. This business, there were a lot of small businesses that were missing these things too. And I didn't realize that. I just thought that business owners knew all these things. And so when I discovered that, this was missing, and, the pool guy in my networking group says, can me and my wife take you to lunch? Can you talk to us about what you're doing over there? And the roofer and the painter and people wanting to pick my brain. I said, oh, this is a thing. Like, I could do this. This is why my life fell into this place. Mm-hmm. I was meant to service the business community because I can relate to them in that way. And so that was kind of how the path came to be. Mm-hmm. It's been a really interesting journey along the way.
Yeah, and I remember when we were prepping for this program, Nicole, one of the things that you referenced in working in a family business and starting your own is that there was that intersection of personal and professional life, working with your family and watching your parents have, challenging conversations, as you said. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that maybe has helped you, again, to kind of lean in towards your own brilliant life?
Yes. So without a doubt, growing up in a family business and being exposed to parents running a business, and then in turn in my adult life, going and working with them is single-handedly the biggest influence in my life, in my career, how I approach clients, how I approach everything. As a child, just being exposed to conversations, mm-hmm. being exposed to situations, you take all that in. And I think now, looking back on my career, it really impacted the way I approached my jobs when I was working in corporate. And it was the reason why I believe I was on such a trajectory, because for such a young girl, I had such a different approach to business and business development. And I believe that was because I was exposed to meetings. Sometimes my dad had to take me with him, sometimes on summer vacation, spring break, I had to be at the office. And so my mom would have me stuff invoices and envelopes, and you're just exposed and you're around it.
Right.
Fast forward to working with my family. I mentioned having such a rigorous formal training. And I mean, the company that I work for was intense, and I'm grateful for it now. But, when you're in those trainings, those leadership trainings, it's all about how can you open the mind of your team to approach the business in a different way, to buy into the direction you want the business to go, to change the way they do their job so that you can work in harmony and get these bigger, better goals and results. It's very different when you have to do that with your parents,
with their baby, right?
With their company, So what I realized, the first couple months were like shock to the system, because not only did I realize that there was so much missing just from a systems and processes perspective, but I realized how little my parents knew about themselves and about how they do business. And I remember thinking to myself, gee, my dad is just like this employee I had. So how did I talk to him? What was his performance review? And I'm going through my laptop and I'm like, I have to talk to him about this because this is a problem. And this is affecting X, Y, and Z. We can't do this because he approaches things in this way, or he's closed off to this idea. And my mom too, and I'm sure me too. And, it was just having to have those kind of conversations with your parents and also witnessing them have those conversations. And at the time, my husband at the time was working with us as well. So I was in a position of being the only person with leadership training, performance management training. I had been exposed to a world and I had seen business through a completely different lens. My parents had only ever worked in that business. So their perspective was just so much smaller. So I had to try to sell them on my ideas. I had to try to sell them on the vision. I had to try to open them up to see the gaps and give it a shot and try to approach business in a different way, try to approach the team in a different way. And I was fortunate that they embraced a lot, but there were those times where the conversations got heated and maybe there were subjects that for a long time had been off limits. But you start to realize, and what I witnessed is that, nothing happens in a vacuum, right? So your mindset around money at home is your mindset around money in business, and your mindset around people and opportunity, your motivators, your fears. What they are outside of the office is what they are inside. And, being able to have those conversations, letting them come to a head and still being a family was a challenge, and not, having an argument with my husband and then having to go home at night and not be angry and not keep the conversation going, or having an argument or disagreement with my parents and then going for
sit down to Sunday dinner.
Exactly.
Yeah, what you're describing is textbook intergenerational challenges in running a business, right? I mean, and actually, I'm pretty impressed with your parents for letting you create that transformation. That's super hard.
It was, and what you just mentioned and that intergenerational challenge in business is the reason I am able to consult and have the business and have the clients that I do. Because
Absolutely.
when I approach business owners, I lead with that pain point. I don't lead with sales. I don't lead with revenue. I don't lead with, I have this silver bullet that's going to grow your business and make you all this money. No, I lead with, I know you got headaches and you're up at night. I know it. And I know why, because most businesses are family businesses. Most small to mid-sized businesses are a husband and a wife, or siblings, or friends. And so the interpersonal challenges and the personal relationship challenges, they bleed into the business and vice versa. And then a lot of it goes unaddressed. And so,
Nicole, I have a question here. You had a lot of courage to decide to pursue that transformation, that growth. What inspires you to push the boundaries and to be more, to help others be more, and also to be of service? What is it that is behind that for you?
Well, I think at the time with that particular business, my motivator was the legacy that it was. My grandfather started that and is still to this day tinkering around the shop. It means something much more than business.
It sounds like you're really excited about just the superpower you have of having that corporate experience, being in their shoes, and really helping them understand a whole new dynamic of having that strategic approach to running their business so that they can be more successful.
I remember also you saying that, it's easier to set boundaries with everybody else and not so much with your family.
Yeah.
Which I would totally agree with. And I know you have a very strict boundary because you had mentioned that your boundary is your son. But the dynamics of being in that family business, and you can go out and set boundaries with potential customers and and clients, but maybe it's a little bit more of a challenge with family.
Yeah, it always has been. In my family, I've always been the pleaser. I'm the oldest daughter in a family full of boys. And I am the referee, and I am the peacekeeper, and I am the one that says yes 9 times out of 10. And it really took a traumatic moment in my life. I went through a very horrific divorce, and as I mentioned, my husband was working with us. And every divorce is horrific, but this was traumatic. This was dramatic. This was a man who had an affair, and this woman outed him publicly 2 weeks before my C-section date. This was a divorce that happened with a team of 28 people watching. And so I found myself having no boundaries, and look where it got me. I had no boundaries with my husband. I had no boundaries with my parents. There's no question in my mind that that was a contributor to my divorce, without a doubt. I had felt like that I was missing a lot of things in my life for the sake of trying to make everyone happy and make everything good for everyone, Right. But there I was, 30, with a newborn baby, and I had just had all this happen. And so, that was a moment in my life where I determined not having boundaries doesn't really get me anywhere, doesn't really do anything for me. And, I have a very close family, and everything is done with good intent. Like they really care about me and my son, and they were there for us through the darkest of times. But, there was also a time where they overstepped their boundary about decisions I wanted to make as I was going through the divorce, as I was trying to do co-parenting, as I was trying to make decisions for my son and what was best for him and what I wanted for him. And the more they intervened or interfered or gave me some pushback, I decided, this is my decision. This is my son. And I don't want to fight and argue. And I don't want to be dragged into court and have a bill, like go into debt with legal bills. And I'd rather just let it go. It happened. It's done. It's over. And now I have to think about the future. I don't want to sit and dwell in what happened. I have to think about, how am I going to live this life now as a single mom with someone I need to see all the time and raise a child with somehow, some way. So and I think there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of hurt. It was a hard time for everybody.
Right.
But for me, it was the moment I realized doing things for everyone else does not help me. Like, you have to kind of make those decisions for yourself. And my son is kind of my hard line.
Owning your role in it and reframing from victim to victor was so key to letting you move forward. When you don't own up to your part in the failed marriage, I think that's part of the healing and overcoming those cycles of anger.
Let me say this, because for anybody who is listening, I went to therapy. I got help. It was a hard time. And I just, I didn't miss a day of work. I just kept going. I was a mess. I was just trying to keep moving, but I didn't know what direction. I kind of was so lost. It took me going to therapy to even understand myself, untangle my own emotions around it, how I felt, understand and be able to look back and see, oh, that's where I messed up. Like, I shouldn't have done that. And then be able to look forward and say, okay, I understand where everybody's feelings are coming from. And I understand that everyone just wants the best, and it's all coming out of love. But no one can make the decisions for me. Like, only I know what will make me happy, and only I know what I want for my son and how I want him to grow up and what I want him to see. And I was determined from day one that I wanted him to see parents that got along. I didn't want him to be exposed to arguing and fighting. In fact, I always viewed, as horrific as the timing of the divorce was, it was a friggin' nightmare. I always thought that it was a gift that had happened when he was so young. So I had control to determine what the future was going to look like.
Thanks so much for being so vulnerable.
Yeah.
And willing to share that with us. So share with us, pivoting a little bit, what are some of your biggest challenges right now?
I think my biggest challenge right now is, having gone through everything I've gone through, it kind of gave me this newfound zest for life. And when you're on rock bottom and you've been there and you look around, you say, okay, this isn't so bad. I figured out how to stand up. First you get on your knees, then you get on your feet, then you look around, you're like, okay, I did it. I got out of rock bottom. Well, once you do that, nothing scares you. No cold call, no email, no networking meeting, no nothing. I just went in everything guns a-blazing. But the challenge with that is I'm more inclined to say yes to everything. I'm more inclined to want to do everything. And, as my business has grown, I've had to really rein it in and give myself that time to pause and look at, okay, what happened this year? What happened this quarter? What worked? What didn't work? What made the most impact? And really narrow the focus and say, okay, this is what I'm focused on, or these things are what's working. And I need to go out and do more of these things. And I can't be distracted by some of these other things. I have to be disciplined. And it really is a discipline that I'm trying to, hone in on is just say yes to the things that are aligned.
Yeah, it's so important, right?
Yeah.
And you do live, you have this success focus, but you do live such a purposeful life in your core business, but also in this incredible women's community you started, the Daily Drip.
Yes.
It's so impressive. We have a women's community too, and I really am excited at what you've accomplished and the quality of your content.
Thank you.
I'd love to know a little more about the impetus, about and really, how you help women, especially women, have the courage to be more, to step into their power, and that I feel that throughout your the Daily Drip website and some of your content, that encouragement.
And that really is the mission, just to encourage people to want more, to be more. What prompted the Daily Drip was, it kind of happened to me. It wasn't something I set out to do. I had been coaching and doing workshops and masterminds around business development and sales and marketing, as a way to get clients. That was my winning strategy, to get consulting clients. And what happened was a community kind of formed out of that. I didn't expect that, but it was predominantly women. And I remember when COVID happened, they wanted to continue these monthly workshops because what else were we going to do? And Zoom was a novelty, and they thought it would be hysterical. Like, let's hop on Zoom. So there I am Googling how to set up a Zoom account, and do a virtual event and all this stuff. But over that year, I engaged with a lot of people. We engaged with almost like 400 people over the course of these monthly things, because people started sharing the link. And it was so much easier to attend than coming in person if you're not in the area or it's not a convenient time. So it really changed the game. And, I decided I wanted to do something with it because I enjoyed it. It was purely out of that. I enjoyed talking about my challenges. I enjoyed sharing my passion for personal and professional development. And so I was surprised and thrilled that so many other people were too. And so at the Daily Drip, what we try to be is just a hub for resources.
So what's the first thing, and you had a supreme power, what is the first change you'd like to make?
I don't know. I honestly hope that never happens. A monopoly is never a good thing. I don't think supreme power has ever worked out well in any point in history. So
yeah, that's true.
I would say if that were the case, I would hope that I could align myself and have people around me that have equal power or more. I mean, that's what the contributor team is all about. Like I said, I had leading between the lines and I talked about a lot of this stuff. It didn't grow like this. Why? Because who am I? I'm one girl. Like, how compelling is that? But, now today we actually have 25 contributors on the team now. We've just signed on a bunch more. And that is the reason why the Daily Drip has taken off like a rocket, because it's not just my voice. It's so many voices, and they're all different ages, and they have all different stories, and they're approaching parenthood at different stages in life and different stages in the game. And they share all the different facets, and they're so genuine and open the way they talk about their business and their life.
Right.
And I think it creates a space for someone like me to connect with someone like Nancy to connect with someone. And so I think that's powerful. So if I ran the world, I would make it that I don't run the world.
Yeah,
I have a consigliere that runs the world with me.
we talk about that. We talk about cultivating that growth mindset and stepping into that abundance and realizing that we all win bigger when we all win, right?
1000%. You see that all the time on social media, community over competition. There's always that hashtag, right? Yes. But to know what it means and to live it is a totally different thing. And it's actually a marketing strategy today. Today, if you search or do any research on like what are some of the key strategies for winning on social media and things like that, it's creating an arm of your content that makes room for other people to share their thoughts. So, or share their experience with your product or service.
Right.
Why? Because people like to see themselves, they like to hear themselves, and we like to see people we like and people we know, and we will engage on it, and the algorithm will go nuts and people will see it. And that is how we grew. That is literally how we grew, was because we were a lot of voices, not just one voice.
So many people carry money silence or a taboo around talking about money. And we carry our own narratives around money, most of them passed down, through other, from prior generations. But you have a really unusual story that your grandparents talked about money, and that helped reinforce your own positive money mindset.
Yeah. My grandparents were depression babies, so, and they're a big part of our family and a big part of our life. They are still alive. They're 90 plus years old, and they are with it, man. And they will tell you what they think and they don't care. And they would always tell stories, and they would always, a lot of these conversations happen around the table, and we would go to their house for breakfast on Sundays, and we would always have a weekly dinner at my parents' house. And a lot of these conversations happen around the table, and they're casual, and they're not, there was always a place to have an open conversation about what are you doing? So it was less about money, and it was more about a plan. Like, what are you doing? When the conversation is not about money, like, how much money do you have? How much are you saving? What are you doing with it? That was never the conversation. It was always like, what's happening next year, Nicole? What's happening in 5 years, Nicole? What's going to happen with Sebastian? He's going to be going to college. What are you doing about that? So the conversation was always about, what are you doing? And then if they wanted to lend their advice, they did. And my parents were always more than happy to lend a helping hand. And that's a fortunate blessing that I had in my life, but they were there for me. Mm-hmm. But what that did for me was really set in stone what kind of parent I wanted to be for my son.